Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. So this is pretty much going to be the old man shouting at clouds episode. And I make no apologies for it, I'm just warning you in advance. There's going to be a whole lot of me getting very grumpy about certain things. To begin with, I've been complaining in recent weeks that there isn't really an awful lot of gaming news these days. Everything claiming to be gaming news is really just AI news, and I'm sick to death of hearing about it. Well, we do actually have some gaming news this week, and almost none of it's good. It's very much a case of be careful what you wish for. So let's get the amusing, but not good, gaming news out of the way first. Yes. Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford has opened his stupid mouth again. It's like, seriously, this guy just needs to have his social media privileges taken away, because every time he opens his big fat stupid mouth, he just puts his big fat stupid foot in it. Good old Randy has rarely had anything intelligent to say, but he's really outdoing himself in the run-up to the release of Borderlands 4. So he ruffled some feathers recently with the comment that a real Borderlands fan would pay $80 to play Borderlands 4, even though he has absolutely nothing to do with the pricing of the game, because he's the CEO of the company that develops it. He's not the publisher. Pricing is down to the publisher. And then, of course, a week later, the publisher said, well, actually, no, it'll cost $70. Only $70. Oh, well, is that all? Okay. Making Randy look, well, not even more stupid, but just exactly as stupid as he is. Well, this week, in a move that comes as a surprise to absolutely nobody, he's talking utter bollocks again. Now saying that he thinks $200 would be a fair price to pay for Borderlands 4, but then immediately contradicts himself in the same sentence by saying that he wishes it were free. I'll give you his exact quote here. He said, "Shit, I think they could charge $200. I wish they'd give it away, because then everyone would play it." All this was in an interview with Games Radar. To be fair, he did actually say something reasonably coherent towards the end of the interview. For example, at the end of the day, when I want something, and I feel like what they're asking is fair, I'll get it. If I don't want something, I won't. Or if I think what they're asking of me isn't fair, I'm not going to do it. All the talk doesn't matter. At the end of the day, that's what it is. Damn it, Randy, you actually started to sound like you were capable of thinking and breathing at the same time at the end of that interview. Where's the fun in that? Well, anyway, Borderlands 4 will be out September the 12th for $70, not $200, and certainly not for free. Does anyone remember Bloodlines 2? I mean, it's not actually out yet, so I don't mean remember it in that regard, but you remember that they're making a Bloodlines 2. Vampire the Masquerade, Bloodlines 2, sequel to the flawed but genius Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. 2004, developed by Troika, published by, I think it was Activision. Horribly broken, like in many cases unplayably so. Seriously, I'm not making this up. There were multiple different ways you could end up with the game in a failed state where it was basically impossible to continue, because of decisions that you'd made that the developers hadn't programmed any eventualities for. I mean, it was horribly, horribly broken. And yet the original game is spoken of in hushed tones by the computer RPG community. Because, I mean, it was effectively just they ran out of money and they just dumped it. They just published it anyway, because, Activision. And it was just horribly broken. But the fan community could see the potential, and so they fixed the game themselves. They released a huge fan patch that fixed the most glaring issues with the game, and the game was amazing. Remember, this was 21 years ago, and for something like 10 years now, they've been threatening a sequel, and I don't know how many publishers and developers it's gone through, but basically the end is in sight. It now has a release date. Despite a development process that made Duke Nukem Forever look like a quick turnaround, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 is coming out on October the 21st. So this is good news, right? Yeah, not so much. I warned you. This is the old man shouting at clouds episode. So what's gotten everybody pissed off about the sequel to a 21-year-old fan favourite game that's been in development for more than a decade and now finally has a release date? Well, it's the publisher, isn't it? it's always the publisher. So for the benefit of those of you who haven't played any of White Wolf's World of Darkness games, whether they're on PC or the original pen and paper tabletop RPGs, Vampire the Masquerade features a number of different vampire clans. And these are essentially vampire character classes. So you've got all kinds of different clans that specialise in different types of things. Like the Bruiser clan, for example. They're kind of like, if you've ever seen the amazing vampire movie Near Dark, they're basically the Bruiser. They're gang members and outlaws. They're all about speed and strength and swiftness and all that sort of thing. Then, as another example, you've got the Tremere clan. And they're vampire mages. They're all about blood magic. You've got the Assamite clan. They're basically vampire assassins. You've got the Ventru clan. They're like the vampire nobility. They're all to do with manipulation and charisma and politics and all that sort of thing. So, huge number of these different vampire clans. And of course, there are different vampire clans in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines too, just as there were in the original game. Like I said, they're essentially your vampire character classes in the game. The clan that you pick determines the kind of abilities and spells and all of that sort of stuff that's going to be available to you, dependent on the clan that you pick. There are 6 clans available in Bloodlines 2. 2 of them are locked behind a DLC paywall. If you want to play the game as a La Sombra or Toreador clan vampire, $30 please, and it's a day 1 DLC. Or in other words, it's already there in the game, on the release date. You know, this isn't stuff that they're working on to add after release. This is effectively content that you have already paid for, but you have to pay extra for to unlock on day 1. This is basically Paradox, the publisher, trying to pull the same shit that BMW tried to pull when they sold you a car that included heating in the seats. I mean, this is hardware. You pay for the car, you drive it out of the showroom, the seats come with heaters, but you couldn't turn the heaters on unless you paid BMW a subscription to turn on things that you actually already owned. Nobody was coming around to your house to fit heaters to the seats. You'd already bought and paid for them. You just couldn't use them unless you coughed up some extra money. This is exactly what Paradox are doing with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. They're trying to sell you a game where 30% of the day 1 content that is in the title that you've already paid for is locked behind an additional paywall. I was actually looking forward to the release of this game. Not so much now. This, by the way, from a publisher, Paradox, who are no strangers to day 1 DLC controversy and have suffered considerable flack in the past for this exact same thing. So much so that the CEO actually at one point said, and I'm not making this shit up, there's room for improvement in how we present on DLC. Yeah, you think? Anyway, what's next? Oh, yeah, quick one. And this one is, unfortunately, and I do apologise, but, you know, it's kind of everywhere. This is AI related. So, but this is funny. This is really good. So Microsoft just launched Copilot AI, or, well, I mean, Copilot AI has been around for a while, but they've just launched Copilot AI functionality in Excel, their spreadsheet software. You can now use Copilot AI in Microsoft Excel and have it generate formulas for you. Fantastic. So that'll make things substantially easier for Excel users, right? Yeah, not so much. Because in exactly the same statement where they announced the AI Copilot functionality in Excel, Microsoft specifically warned everybody not to use it for any task requiring accuracy or reproducibility. Like, for example, everything that you might want to actually use a spreadsheet for. Or in other words, this AI shit that we have spent and continue to spend billions of dollars developing and supporting has less actual functionality than the calculator app that comes with Windows for free. I had to double check the source of this post to make sure that Randy Pitchford wasn't moonlighting as an AI spokesman for Microsoft. I just don't get it. I don't understand. Why? What possible benefit can there be in announcing and releasing AI functionality in Excel while at the same time warning everybody in the same fucking announcement not to use the AI functionality in Excel? Please tell me it's not just me. I cannot possibly be the only one that sees the obvious problem here. Can I? How stupid are these people? Well, speaking of the general shittification of everything in the world today, do you remember when you bought a gaming console and over the course of that console generation, the price of the console would actually go down? PlayStation 4, for example. I mean, there were some price spikes on Amazon where sometimes it might cost as much as £600 here in the UK, but that was an outlier. Generally, you would never be expected to pay more than £400 for a PlayStation 4. And most of the time, the price hovered at around about the £350 mark. But within about a year or so into the PlayStation 4's life cycle, that actually went down to around about £250. Not so much with the PlayStation 5, which debuted on release at an eye-watering £450 and then even more for the Pro version, and now, at roughly the same point in its life cycle where the PlayStation 4 was being reduced to £250, the PlayStation 5 is going up, with an average $50 price hike being applied to all models across the entire PlayStation 5 range. It's going up in price, not down. Disclaimer. We're going deep into old man shouts at clouds territory here. I can remember when I was a kid, and yes, this was a very long time ago, listening to my grandmother telling stories about how much cheaper everything was back in her day. She would tell me stories about how for a shilling, and this was in old money before we went metric, but it's roughly the equivalent of, at the time, 5 pennies. For a shilling, she could go out, as a girl, she could go out for a night on the town with a shilling in her pocket, get the bus into town, have something to eat, go to a dance, go to the cinema, watch a movie, then get something else to eat and come home and still have change out of 5 pennies. Now, I didn't believe a word of it. I mean, she was telling me these stories in the 1970s. She was in her 60s at the time. She was talking about when she was a girl in the 1930s. And I mean, I didn't believe a word of it, but that's what things cost in the 1930s. Now, obviously, there's inflation, and we're not. I mean, this is a generational thing. In fact, I mean, this is a multi-generational thing because this was my grandmother, not my mother. So the price of things in the 1930s. I mean, you know, inflation is obviously a thing, and I remember similar things back when I was a kid. The prices were just ridiculous. Like, for example, look, don't judge her, it was the 70s, everybody smokes. My mother used to send me, when I was very young, to the newsagents to buy her cigarettes. And I remember this specifically because she would send me to buy a packet of 20 John Player Special. And she would give me 20 pennies, because that's how much they cost. Right, the same thing, you won't get a lot of change out of £15 for today. But the reason I remember specifically that price is because the first time she sent me, I went to the newsagent and asked for 20 John Player, and the newsagent gave me one packet of 20 John Player, and I just stood there and burst into tears, and he said, "What's wrong?" So I asked for 20, you've only given me one. I didn't understand that there were 20 cigarettes in the packet. But that's the reason why I specifically remember exactly how much a packet of 20 cigarettes cost in the mid-1970s, because of that incident. And now, the exact same thing, 50 years later, costs 75 times as much. Now, okay, maybe listing the price of a packet of 20 cigarettes isn't a fantastic example. Because there are other things that affect that price rather than just a generation of inflation. People coming to realise that actually maybe smoking isn't that good for you, and governments applying punitive taxes to cigarettes, for example, in order to discourage their purchase and use. But the example still stands. Over the course of generations, prices go up. That's just the way things have always been. Except that's not what's happening anymore. Prices have always gone up over the course of generations. The inflation's generally been a gradual thing. There have been occasional spikes, of course, but generally it's not something that you really notice on a year-to-year basis. Well, that ship sailed relatively recently, didn't it? I can remember watching this YouTube video of a guy in America. I can't remember the name of the YouTube channel, I can't remember the name of the person. It was a couple of weeks ago. With the rise, largely due to the pandemic, but with the rise of online grocery ordering, which was a thing prior to the pandemic in 2020, but basically became the standard post-pandemic. This guy was doing his weekly grocery shop, and a lot of these places will remember your shopping history, mostly as a way to hit you with targeted advertising, but also, for convenience sake, where if there's a whole bunch of things that you regularly order on a regular basis, you can just reorder. So as he was putting this shopping order together and he was looking at the option to just reorder a previous order, the thought occurred to him, just exactly how far back does this reorder thing go? And this particular supermarket he was doing his online ordering from, mine doesn't do this, but his did, it remembered every order that he'd ever made. So just out of curiosity, he went back to an order that he'd made 4 years ago. Now this is important, okay? We're only talking 4 years. We're not talking about a generational difference here. We're not talking about my grandmother saying that she could have a night out in the town and get change out of 5 pence. Or me saying that I used to buy cigarettes for my mother for 20 pence that would cost £15 today. We're only going back 4 years. And that order from 4 years ago cost him about $200. So just out of curiosity, he thought, let me just press this reorder button and see how much it costs now. And the exact same order, 4 years later, cost $440. What the actual fuck? He's not ordering rare earth materials from China here or anything, He's not ordering raw lithium. This is bread, milk, eggs. $440 fucking dollars. And this got me thinking. Because over roughly the same time period, we've seen the decline of physical media in games. It was in the early 2020s when internet transfer speeds and online store infrastructure became sufficiently advanced for primarily PC and Xbox gaming to start shifting away from physical media and instead embracing the whole digital download thing. Now, this is probably going to surprise you, but back in 2020, the average price of a PC game on Steam was actually $13.30. Yeah, I know, it sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Although you have to take into account that we're talking about on Steam, there's a lot of shovelware that gets tossed out there for $5 or less. And this is, of course, an average. The more realistic figure, if you're talking about, I hesitate to use the word high quality when I'm describing a AAA game title, but if you're talking about a high quality AAA game title back in 2020, the average price was $60. This at the time when the overwhelming majority, in fact in the case of Steam you could argue that it had actually been going on for a couple of years prior to 2020, but generally speaking across the industry as a whole, particularly PC and Xbox, this at the time when the overwhelming majority of titles were no longer available on physical media, when they were only available for purchase as a digital download. Why is this significant? Huge cost reductions for the publishers. They no longer have to pay a factory to manufacture the CDs or the DVDs that the games come on. They no longer have to pay for the packaging. They no longer have to buy or rent warehouses to store all of their product. They no longer have to pay transportation and shipping costs to get the product into the game shops. It's basically free money. Ones and zeros don't cost a lot. So what you'd expect to happen from 2020, when the publishers were reaping the benefits of huge cost reductions in the actual production of their games, to 5 years later, now in 2025, when they're also poised to reap the benefits of huge savings in labour costs because they're basically replacing everybody with AI, you would expect the price of games to have dropped by a significant margin, wouldn't you? So why is it that 5 years later, with all of these cost-cutting measures in place, the actual price of a AAA game is anything from $70 to $80, and they want to charge you $100. And if they can't get away with that, they'll simply charge you $70 to $80 for the game, but lock 30% of the content behind a paywall that they expect you to pay an additional 50% surcharge to unlock. Over the course of my life, and I'm not that old, I'm 55, but over the course of my life, I've gotten used to, this kind of pricing as a generational thing. When my grandmother was telling me that she could have a full night out in the town as a girl for the price of 5p or less, or when my mother would send me to the shops to buy a packet of 20 cigarettes for 20p, this was a generational shift in pricing. You could understand it. 5 years is not a generation. I suppose we should be grateful that unlike our groceries, the prices of games haven't doubled over the course of the last 5 years. But given the savings that the publishers have reaped by everything going digital, they should have gone down. So effectively, they basically have doubled. I realise this entire episode of Mingles with Jingles has basically just been me shouting at clouds, because it doesn't matter what I say. It's not going to make any difference. Still, I felt like it needed to be said. And I'd be very interested to hear what you lot think on this subject. What kind of ridiculous and completely unjustified price rises have you seen over the course of the last 5 years in other market sectors? Let's know in the comments. You know where it is, you know what it's for, you know what to do. With that said, I hope you've, maybe enjoyed isn't the right word, but I hope this episode of Mingles with Jingles has at least given you something to think about. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.